Okay, assalamu alaikum. Hope you're all well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Okay, let's see who we have with us today. Assalamu alaikum. Kukish. Noah's Ark is in Chechnya. I don't know about that, never heard of that. But now I've never actually looked at where is Noah's Ark. I remember a long time ago seeing this documentary trying to show that it's somewhere in Turkey, right? There's some place in Turkey, and I don't know what it was. It was like some ultrasound or some, imaging of a mountain showing a skeleton of an ark there. But I don't know how accurate that was. I mean, that was a very long time ago when I saw that. Walaikum assalam, Hector. Hope you're well. Good to have you. And Shah Zaib Shah, good to see you as well. All right, okay, so what I have is a fairly brief presentation. It shouldn't take too long. And as always, a reminder, anybody's free to come on and share any insights they have into any verses of the Qur'an, or just come on to chat. No problem at all. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get on with it. Let me get the presentation on. Okay, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about, I came up recently, well, not that recently, I think it was like a few weeks ago, on Twitter, the whole debate on whether Nuh's flood was global or local, right? Was it a flood that covered the whole world, or was it just sent down to basically do away with Noah's own people? Or perhaps you could think that Noah's people were the only people around on Earth at the time, in which case there's a kind of overlap there. But I wanted to come at this from a slightly different angle. Beforehand, though, of course, I do think it was a local flood, and it seems pretty obvious that it's going to be a local flood. Firstly, because I don't think that Noah's people were the only people in the world at the time, and then, of course, if that's the case, then the flood had to be local just for Noah's people, right? Even if you were to say that Noah's people were the only people on the earth, then it would still have to be local. Why would God cover the whole of the earth just to drown Noah's people, which obviously aren't going to be people who are going to be, covering the whole globe? They're going to be in a very small region of the earth. It's not going to be, in the whole world, the whole globe. So it comes back to the idea. But I'm just going to read out these. These were tweets actually from Ian Cook on Twitter, who put these together. He wrote it nicely, so I'll just read out what he have there, why he put there. It says here, the Qur'anic account consistently refers to the flood as an event involving Nuh and his people specifically, and that's true, right? Whenever you read the story of Nuh in the Quran, he's always talking to my people, all my people, ya qawmi, like all of the messengers pretty much. They all say ya qawmi, la qawmi, apart from Isa, who says ya bani Israel, right? So for example, in verse 11:25 states, and we had sent Nuh to his people saying, I am to you a clear warner. So it's just to his people, okay? Another point, Nuh himself only addresses his own people repeatedly using, the phrase, oh, my people, right? So the Quran makes no explicit mention of other nations or populations being impacted. There is nothing of that sort in the Quran at all. And when describing the fate of those who rejected Nuh's message, so his people, the language suggests a specific group, right? So in Surah 7, verse 64, but they rejected him and we delivered him and those with him in the ark. right? And we drowned those who rejected our signs, from his people, of course. They were indeed a people who were blind, right? So to me, it's pretty clear, of course, that the Quran, the punishment of the flood was to Noah's people alone, right? And no other people. And we can see later on I'll show you later on in the slide that there are verses which show that there are other people alive in the world even after the flood, again showing that it's not some global event obliterating everyone. But anyway, one of the main arguments that Nuh's flood was indeed a global flood are the verses commanding Nuh to put into his ark of everything, of every species, two. The verses say, "Min kullin zawjayn ithnain," right? From everything, two zawjs, a pair, two, right? So, min kullin zawjayn ithnain. So that this verse is used. Okay, that means that Noah has been commanded to put into the ark two of every single type of living creature, every single animal. Why? In order to save them, of course, right? To save them from being drowned, right? Who's going on the ark? Noah, his family, apart from his son, right? And those who followed him, right? Those who followed him, they are going in the ark, and what else needs to be saved, right? What else needs to be saved so they aren't drowned are the animals. So that's how it goes. But if we don't accept that and we don't say that, Noah had to gather, two pairs of every animal in the whole world, and however long that would take, or perhaps God made them all come marching towards him, right? If it's not referring to that, what could it be referring to? And my opinion is it's referring to what is already mentioned in the Quran about the azwaj, right? So the Quran is saying, "Min kullin zawjayn ithnain," from every zawj, two, right? From every pair, two. And the Quran already lists the azwaj that have been sent down to us in terms of the livestock, right? They're enumerated in the Quran. It says, "Thamaniyatu azwaj." This is Surah Al-An'am, in the chapter of livestock, right? So it says, "Thamaniyatu azwaj min al-dha'n ithnain wa min al-ma'z ithnain," right? They are 8 pairs, 8 azwaj, right? 8 mates of the sheep, 2, and of the goats, 2, right? And the next verse says, وَمِنَ الْإِبْلِ اثْنَيْنِ مِنَ الْبَقْرِ اثْنَيْنِ وَمِنَ الْإِبْلِ اثْنَيْنِ مِنَ الْبَقْرِ اثْنَيْنِ مِنَ الْإِبْلِ اثْنَيْنِ وَمِنَ الْبَقْرِ اثْنَيْنِ, right? And of camels there's 2, and of cattle there's 2, right? So it's talking about the livestock, right? The livestock which God has sort of like put at the disposal of mankind, right? And so that's what makes the most sense. Okay, that's what makes the most sense. It would be the natural concern of Nuh and his followers, of his people, right? That if a great flood is coming, right, and they are of course going to be likely a people who farm and have livestock and animals. So a great flood is coming, right? And of course they're not going to be able to carry their houses inside the ark, right? Unless they live in tents and they could sort of like pack up the tents and put them in the ark. But a great flood is coming, right? And they're going to escape on the ark, right? Okay, what are you going to do afterwards, right? The flood is going to come, it's going to destroy everything. What about our livelihood? What about our animals? What about our livestock? What about our cows, our goats, our sheep, etc., right? So that would be the main concern that they would be having. If they're going to escape on the ark, they would be thinking about, their wealth, basically, their means of livelihood for after, the flood waters go down. And so the answer is given to that sort of like unspoken question, what should we do about, what about our livestock? The answer is given: when the flood waters rise, put 2 pairs of each into the ark, right? And your family and those who follow you, etc. But that's basically the answer to that sort of unspoken question. The natural, most obvious concern Nuh's people would have. Okay. And again, it's so that when after the flood, they'll be able to rebuild their flocks, right? Nuh and his people were almost certainly farmers, and their wealth was their herds. And we can even glean some of this from certain verses in the Quran, like in Surah Nuh itself, from verse 10 onwards, where Nuh implores his people, "Istaghfiru rabbakum innahu kana ghaffara," right? Seek forgiveness from your Lord, truly He is most forgiving. يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِدْرَارًا, He will send the sky upon you in abundance, like continuing showers, right? You have lots of shower. Well, why would that be a good thing for them? Well, because they're farmers. They're not traders or anything. They are farmers. So rain is very important to farmers, right? And give you increase in wealth and children, and provide for you gardens and provide for you rivers, right? So the increase in wealth here is likely going to be the animals, the livestock, right? So having good rain and good pastures, the herds will increase, and they'll be able to have more children, and God will be able to provide for them also gardens, right? They'll be able to build gardens for themselves, and rivers nearby, etc. Right? But the point is that even without this, we know that the majority of people in the past were farmers, right? They were rural, and they they lived off land. What gives this opinion, I think, the most weight is the timeline. If we just look at the timeline in terms of the Quran, the command to place in the ark of each two pairs, it only comes after the flood waters had already risen. So whether we consider a local flood or a global flood, there just would not have been any time for them to put into the ark any but their own animals, right? So if you look at here's one of the verses which mention this: حتى إذا جاء أمرنا وفارت النور قل نحمل فيها من كل زوجين اثنين. So حتى إذا جاء أمرنا وفارت النور, right? And so it was until when our command came and the oven overflowed, right? So the water started to rise. It was then that we said, right? قلنا احمل فيها من كل زوجين اثنين, right? Load upon a ship of each, it doesn't say creature in the verse, right? It just says of each two mates and your family, except those about whom the word has proceeded, and include whoever believes, of course, well, the other faithful. So if you just look at this, even when it says min kullin zawjayn ithnain, and then it says your family, right? Why would the other animals of the world greater priority, which they have nothing to do really with Nuh? He's just going to save all the animals. Why are the animals sort of like mentioned beforehand, right, before his family and the rest? Okay. I would say that again, these are his own livestock, their livelihoods, what they will survive on afterwards. There's some importance being given to these, right, to be mentioned before even his family, right? But the main point is again that this command, it comes after the waters have already risen, right? So if you just imagine it and picture it, the waters have already risen. And the reason why the command only comes then is because before then, his animals need to graze, right, in the pastures, right? You're not going to put all your animals into an ark, I don't know, 1 week before, 2 weeks before, however long. No, you do it when the water starts to rise and your animals can no longer graze, and it's basically time to embark, right? You put them on at that time. So there would just be no time to put in even the local animals, right? He has no time to go around collecting all of the local animals to put them all in 2 by 2. What he has time for, and what they have time for, is their own animals, right? Their own livestock. Another verse: فَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِ أَنِ اصْنَعِ الْفُلْكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا وَوَحْيِنَا. So we inspired him to construct the ship under our observation and our inspiration. And when the command comes and the oven overflows, put into the ship from each two mates and your family except those for whom the decree has already proceeded. So again, the same thing, right? It's after the flood waters have started to rise that he is told to put into the ark two of each kind, right? So I think, to me, it leaves no doubt that it's really just about his own animals. Another indication that this was, of course, a local flood and not a global flood is that after Nuh's people had been drowned, there were still kuffar on earth that Nuh saw. And how do we know that? We see that at the end of Surah Nuh itself, right? That there's this passage where Nuh is making this prayer, and this prayer he's making it after the flood has already happened, after his people have already been drowned, right? So afterwards, he makes a prayer asking God to not leave on the earth a single kafir. Now, why would he say that, right, if already a global flood had happened and destroyed or gotten rid of all of the kuffar? It doesn't make any sense. Rather, what happened is he probably came down. There's probably a time gap here, right? But after he came down from the ark and they settled onto the land again, eventually he came across other people, and in disappointment that there were still other people on the planet, he makes this dua, which is quite an outrageous dua, to be honest. And I think it's out of hurt, right? Because if you remember, we've discussed this before. I think that the Nuh's son that's mentioned in the story isn't actually his son, right? It's a bastard from his wife's infidelity, right? And there's lots of reasons to believe that. So he was just not happy seeing more kuffar, because what happened is a kafir entered his home, via infidelity with his wife, and produced this bastard son, who of course Nuh thought it was his own son, right? And that's why you have that prayer where he says, "Oh God, my son is from my family, and you are the wisest judge," basically asking him to forgive his son. And God responds to him, "No, he isn't from your son." I take that literally. He isn't from your family. I take that literally. He really wasn't from his family. And the verse says, "Innahu amalun ghayru salih." He is an act which is not righteous. What does it mean? Infidelity, right? Your son is basically an act which is not righteous. He's a product of an act which is not righteous, right? So he did not want to have any more kuffar entering his home, which is why he makes that prayer, right? Oh, and God, رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِمَنْ دَخَلَ بَيْتِيَ مُؤْمِنًا. Oh God, forgive me and my parents and whoever enters my home as a faithful person, mu'minan. Not a person of infidelity, a person of faith. And in that prayer he says, God, destroy, don't leave a single home for any kuffar at all, because if you do, they will misguide your people, and they will not give birth except to kuffar, wicked kuffar. And of course that's not true. A kafir does not give birth to only a kafir, right? And of course that prayer, in the end, it's left hanging at the end of the surah, right? That there's no, the prayer, the surah ends with the prayer, and we are not, there's no indication that God accepted that prayer. Maybe accepted part of it and part not, but I think it shows a lot of that dua of Nuh shows a lot of frustration. But anyway, if you want to read that part, read it for yourself. It's from verse 25 onwards, Surah Nuh, which is Surah 71. And note that Surah 71, that verse 25 says that due to their sins, they were drowned. Who are they? Only his people, of course, right? Only his people were drowned. And thus the prayer in verse 26, the next verse, can only be directed at other than his people, okay? Other than those who were drowned, which shows again that it couldn't have been a global flood. And again, I just wrote over here at the end, the justification that he gives, which is that a kafir would only birth another wicked kafir, is of course just not true. Okay. Lastly, why would God even need to save, all the animals? Why would God need to save, all of the animals, all of the wild animals, right? Now you can understand God telling Noah to save his own livestock. The domesticated animals are basically dependent upon human beings, right? They are domesticated, just wait where the human being leaves them, right? Um, but in terms of the wild animals, why would God need Noah to to save them? Okay, God could just give them those animals the instincts to flee, to get away, and in fact, that is something that has long puzzled people, and something that has been, you know, reported by numerous peoples all over the world for time immemorial. That animals seem to be able to sense impending natural disasters, right? They sense an earthquake a week before it happens. They sense a volcano eruption a week before it happens, 2 weeks before it happens. You know, they seem to be able to sense these huge natural disasters before they happen and actually move away. Okay, and there are even efforts to try to use animals, in early warning systems. So this is something you can research yourself. I've put in a couple of things here. Maybe I'll read a bit of it. There's another one over here. But here, this is from the BBC. And if you all remember, if you're old enough to remember the tsunami, which is wow now when I think about it, it's 20 years ago. Subhanallah. And the Great Tsunami, which happened in off the coast of Indonesia, right? And it really was a huge thing. There was a huge earthquake in the middle of the ocean, basically, and it created this huge tidal wave, which swept across so many places, right? And it destroyed so many homes, so many people drowned and died. There's a huge death toll, and all of that. Okay. The local man-made early warning systems, such as tidal and earthquake sensors, failed to raise any clear alert. We didn't get a proper alert. Many sensors were out of action due to maintenance issues, while many coastal areas lacked any tsunami siren warning systems. Haphazard communications also failed to provide warnings, with many text messages failing to reach mobiles in threatened areas or going unread, etc. Anyway, yet in the minutes and hours before surging walls of water up to 9 meters, 30 feet high, smashed through coastlines, some animals seemed to sense the impending peril and make efforts to flee. So, according to eyewitness accounts, elephants ran for higher ground. Flamingos abandoned low-lying nesting areas, and dogs refused to go outside. In the coastal village of Bangkok in Thailand, locals report a herd of buffalo by the beach suddenly pricking their ears, gazing out to sea, then stampeding to the top of a nearby hill a few minutes before the tsunami struck. Okay. Survivors also reported seeing animals such as cows, goats, cats, and birds deliberately moving inland shortly after the earthquake and before the tsunami came, says Irina Rafliana, previously part of our advisory group for the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Risk, and now is a researcher, etc. And there are even like songs, children's songs in Indonesia and places like this, which have this, right? So there's a song which goes, "When animals go crazy, run away for the sea, run away from the sea and go to the highlands," right? That's a song that's sung by Indonesian children for centuries, right? Um, you know, in fact, people in Indonesia reported that elephants fled the coast for the interior of the country before the tsunami hit, etc. Anyway, um, there's not much more. There's actually nothing else I have apart from that. But that's an interesting thing to look at. So when you put that in context with the flood of Noah, again, why would God need Noah to save all of the wild animals? No, Noah would need to save his own people, his followers, his family, and his livestock, basically. So that's where I will end this. What shall I put? I'll leave that here. And that's basically the end of my little presentation here. Okay. Anybody? I don't have anybody backstage. Let me just have a look quickly at the chat. Assalamu alaikum. Hey, greetings, people. Miss Ali too. All right. Okay. All right. That's the end of the presentation. I don't really have anybody else backstage. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask about that, or any comments? Place them in the chat, or hop on. You're more than welcome. If I don't have anybody within the next sort of like 5 minutes, we can end the stream earlier than usual. Please also, everybody, keep your prayers for people in Gaza, Sudan, Congo, all of these places where things are just going really badly in the world, and especially now it seems like we're heading for an actual war, right? Oh, the US wanting just by hook or by crook, well, Israel really wanting by hook or by crook to engage Iran in a full war, and that could be happening. Hi, this is a bit out of topic, but can you speak about the Araf? What's Araf? We mean the Araf, yes, the Araf, which is basically the name of the seventh surah, right? Surah Al-Araf. Yeah, well, I know there are some people that say this is for people who are sort of like in between, right? That their good deeds and bad deeds are sort of like exactly balanced in the middle. And so they get to wait in this place called Al-Ahraf, which sort of translates loosely to the heights. And they stay there and wait until everybody else has had their judgment and either gone to Jannah or gone to hell. And then they will be judged and that they will be likely forgiven, right? No, I think that the Araf, those who are, the verse says, وَعَلَى الْأَعْرَافِ رِجَالٍ يَعْرِفُونَ كُلًّا بِسِيمَاهُم, that those are the messengers. Those are the messengers because they will be called upon to be witnesses over mankind, right? On the day of judgment, the Prophet himself has been said that he will be called upon to be a witness. Just tell me my connection is unstable. I don't know if you guys can still hear me. Hopefully you can. Just tell me my connection is very unstable, even though my internet is fine. Anyway, so I think that those are messengers. Another point, a point related to that, is I don't believe that anybody will go to hell or to Jannah by sort of the skin of their teeth, right? Nobody goes to evil with just like, oh, I just made it, I just made it into Jannah, or oh, damn it, I only just missed out on Jannah and I'll be in hell. No, right? Because then it sort of seems almost like luck. If just one other thing happened or this other thing happened, then you'd be in Jannah or you'd be in hell. That isn't the way this world's test is going to work, right? The ibtila of this world is going to actually put you right where you belong, right where you should be, right? And it won't be by a small margin, right? It won't be by a small margin. It's like saying that you can make a test for people, an exam for people, and a certain section pass and another certain section fail, and then there are people who sort of like got lucky, right? That they were sort of only just managed to pass or only just failed, right? I don't believe that will be the case. I believe that we are tested continuously in this world until it's clear where you belong, right? That you're not, God isn't going to give sort of like put you in that position where you sort of like only just missed out on Jannah. No, and the people who go to hell are going to be the worst of people, right? They're going to be the worst of people. I mean, just to be able to go to Jannah. You just have to be, the minimum you have to do is not commit any major sins, right? Don't murder anybody. Don't despise some orphans. Don't commit zina with a married woman. These sort of things, right? Don't bear false testimony, right? Don't do any of these major sins, and that's it. Just stay away from major sins, and you're fine. So I don't accept sort of that traditional idea of the A'raf being sort of like this, the people who are sort of like in limbo, who sort of like they have their good deeds and bad deeds equally balanced. No, I don't accept that. And in fact, I also think that going back to the idea of I did a stream about reincarnation, that people whose lives have been cut short by murder or something violent, or maybe disease or something, but basically those who their lives have been cut short such that they have not been tested enough, where it's not clear where they're going to be, right? Then those people would be reincarnated, and that's how I sort of like reconcile what seems to be a true phenomenon, which is the past life memories in children. Okay, and it makes the most sense to me, right? It makes the most sense to me that somebody who has not been adequately tested in this world, which is the purpose of it, right? You have that verse in Surah Al-Mulk, الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. That life and death themselves, they were created so that to test you, which of you is best in action. So life and death, they serve that purpose. They serve that purpose, right? So if you have not been tested properly, and you're sort of still in the middle, maybe a little bit worse than you should be, or only a little bit better than you should be, then I think you would be, and you die before being fully tested, then you could be reincarnated again, right? So that's what I think about that. Yes, and definitely most of the major sins have got to do with injustice against other people, right? I mean, that's the purpose of God sending messengers and books, right? In the Qur'an, that the God has sent messengers and books and sent down with them the balance, لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ, so that mankind would stand up for justice, stand up in justice, maintain justice, right? That's the whole reason for God sending messengers and books, right? It isn't so that people would worship God only, or so that they should recognize that there's no God but God. No, that isn't the case, right? And the Quranic answer of why God sent messengers and books is so that mankind could establish justice, right? And which is why the one sin, which is a one-way ticket to hell, isn't shirk or isn't any of these other things. The one sin, which is a one-way ticket to hell, is to murder a person who's enjoying safety, right? يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا, whoever kills a mu'min on purpose, then the Quran gives that his reward is hell, and that he's cursed, God is angry with him and set for him a huge punishment, right? And that verse is not followed by except he who repents or anything like that. That isn't even offered, right? That isn't offered at all, because how are you going to repent from that, right? How are you going to repent from murdering somebody? Are you going to bring him back to life? You can't, right? You can repent from stealing. You can repent from zina. You can repent from many things. You can repent from, right? You can make things up, but the murdered person, he's gone. How are you going to make it up to him? Anyway, let me put on Hector. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Hey, wa alaikum salam. How are you?
Good, brother. It's been a while.
Yes. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Your voice is a bit low, by the way.
Oh, my voice. How about now? Can you hear me clearer?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit clearer, but not
Okay.
as clear to be
So,
honest, just louder.
oh, now it's loud. Now it's too loud.
No, no, no. I said it's better. Like the
Oh,
volume is higher, but the quality just isn't as great.
okay.
But anyway, it's
Because
fine. Maybe it's
because
from my end. I'm actually
no, no, it is.
in a different place right now.
No, I think it's my earbuds because I'm using
No.
earbuds
All right.
and my.
Okay.
But can you hear me more or less? Good.
Yeah, yeah. I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. So yeah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for sharing that interesting perspective of Noah alayhi salatu wasalam. Interesting, interesting. I've always thought that yeah, it was more of a local flood, but I never had the proof using the Quran. But thank you for bringing that to light.
No
Okay,
problem.
yeah. Okay, so in the past couple of weeks, I've been reading Quran more in a chronicle order, more or less
Yeah.
what accepted by most scholars as chronicle order. And I
Mm.
came across Surah 74, the last part, between ayat 32 and 56. And I had a question because I'm a bit confused on a topic here. Maybe you can enlighten me on a topic here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So 74 from 36 onwards.
From 30, for to be more precise, from 38 onward,
Okay.
or at least from 38 to 48. Those 10 ayat.
Okay. So this again, Surah 74. So Surah
Yes,
Mudassir.
yes, sir.
Mudathir from verse 38. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I was looking at this, and I'm going to use. I'm not going to read the Arabic. I'm just going to use the translation
That's fine.
from. I think this is the Abdullah translation,
Mhm.
where it says every person is a pledge for what he has earned. Okay, I
Yeah.
understand that. Except
Mm.
those on the right. Okay, I understand that. In
Mm.
gardens, they, I imagine, referring to the previous ayat, will ask one another, what
Yeah.
about the mujrimun? The mujrimun,
Mm.
or they translate as polytheists, criminals, disbelievers. We can
Yeah.
skip all of that. And they
Mhm.
will say to one another, the people in the garden will say to one another, what
Mhm.
what has caused you to enter hell? I guess they're talking to the people who are in Jahannam.
Yeah.
They will say, the people in Jahannam will say, we were not of those who used to offer salah.
Mhm.
Now, in the Arabic, it says minal mu'saleen. So
Yeah.
I imagine that will be from the people of salah, right? The people of salah.
Yeah.
Now, then it goes on. No, we used to feed the miskin or the poor, right? And
Mhm.
so forth. I just want to stop there because I'm a bit confused here, where it talks about the people of Salah, that they were not from the people of Salah.
Mm.
Now, it according to what I've read, this ayat is a Meccan ayat, and it was revealed. If I understand this correctly, it was revealed during the first years of the Prophet's revelation. My
Mm.
question is, why would they mention Salah here if Salah hadn't been wajib at that time?
Mm.
You know, that's my
Yeah. No,
question.
I understand. Yes.
Yeah.
No.
And
So look. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm a bit perplexed about this because a lot of things have come into my mind. Like maybe Allah is giving this revelation to the mushrik during the early stages of revelation, uh, only to let them know of things that might happen in the future, right? Like
Mm.
in our future, not in Allah's future, because I don't want to get into the aqidah, but
Yeah.
in that, what we would consider to be future, right?
Mm.
And in Jannah or Jahannam. Now, why would Allah or is there something connected here about, I don't know, because why would he mention Salah here if this
Mm.
revelation, if this ayah was revealed way before way before Hijrah and
Mm.
way before Salat was made, well, what most people consider to be wajib.
Yeah.
Can you enlighten me on that? Maybe you might have something to clarify my understanding of the
Yeah,
matter?
well, I mean, when it comes to the chronology of the surahs, um, you have to be careful of that, because I mean, it seems clear that a lot of surahs were not revealed all in one go, right? That you'd have parts of a surah revealed, right, and then parts revealed at another time. There are surahs, I think, which were revealed all in one go, like Surah An-Nur, because the beginning it says Surah Anzalnaha, right? We have sent down this surah, right? So it seems that the whole surah was sent down in one go, right? And then there are other verses which talk about sending down just verses, right? So and when it comes to this surah, the tradition doesn't report that when they place this surah early, they're mainly talking about the beginning of it, right? The beginning of it seems definitely to be early, because it's related to that whole situation where the Prophet would cover himself up, right? Mudassir, the cloaked one, right? He would cover himself up, just out of comfort, out of that the shock of receiving revelation. So firstly, these parts could be later on, right? And then you've got another thing as well. There's Surah Al-Alaq, the very what's considered to be among the first surahs. I think Surah Al-Fatiha is the very first surah, but then afterwards comes Al-Alaq. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق, and in that surah as well, it talks about as-salah, and does talk about salah as well, right? So it talks about أفرأيت الذي ينهى عبدا إذا صلى. Do you not see the one who discourages a servant when he engages in salah, when he prays, right? And then on top of that is that you have to understand, when you're talking about salah, right? The salah has always been around, right? Even the people of Mecca and Quraysh, they used to engage in salah. They used to do salah. Okay, this actually helps you to understand that salah doesn't mean the 5 daily prayers. That there's not just one format of salah. That salah isn't a specific way of doing it, a specific ritual. Salah is just prayer, and prayer in the general sense, right? In the general sense. So even though it wasn't made a wajib then, it hadn't been made wajib then, it was still something that was recognized as a virtue. Right? So just like, in this surah, it's talking about these things as virtues, right? Why were you in hell? Well, we weren't of the musallin. We weren't of the musallin, and we never used to feed the poor. So we weren't people of prayer, of contemplation, right? And we weren't people who are active in giving charity, right? And we used to, وَكُنَّا نَخُوضُ مَعَ الْخَاضِعِينَ, right? And we used to just, we wandered around with those who wandered in nonsense, right? We didn't get involved in anything meaningful, right? كنا نخوض مع الخاضعين. But the other thing about it is, if you want to understand the Quranic concept for this idea, because it didn't say here we didn't pray, it didn't say قالوا لم نصلي, it didn't say we didn't do salah, right? For example, in the next verse it says, we never used to feed the poor. لم نكن نطعم المسكين, right? It doesn't say we weren't of those who fed the poor. It doesn't say that. It says it's referring to the action, right? ولم نكن نطعم المسكين, and we did not feed the poor, right? It doesn't say, and we were not of the people who feed the poor. Well, wasn't that? It's not phrased in that sort of way. So why is the thing about salah phrased in that kind of way? Why is it said? Why is it says لم نكن من المصلين, right? Why are we not of the musallin? Well, the musallin are defined in Surah Al-Ma'arij, right? So while you're doing this chronological reading of the Quran, it's actually one of the things which helps you to sort of put the chronology in the right order, because the traditional chronology is not correct, right? There are some things which are just not right, and you can see that by how some verses will mention other verses, right? So, for example, any verse which talks about giving zakat, it must have come after Surah Al-Layl, because that's where sort of zakat is defined, right? And the same when you talk about the Musallin, who are the Musallin, right? This surah, this at least these verses that you're talking about here, this verse where it says "Lam nakun min al-musallin," it must have come after the verses in Surah Al-Ma'arij, the verses in Surah 70, right? Because in Surah 70, from verse I think 22 onwards, it defines who are the Musallin, who are the people of prayer. Okay, so if you go back and look at, if you go to the Surah, right? Let me try and pull it out actually. Yeah, Surah 70, verse 22 onwards, right? It talks about who the Musallin are, right? And their qualities and their characteristics. And if you look at these, it's not talking about just the ritual prayer, right? It's talking about the ritual prayer and its effect, right? That what is a person who engages in ritual prayer, if he's really doing it properly, what kind of a person is he? Which is why this verse is talking about being of the Muslimin, not just being the person who prays, but being of a real person of prayer, a real person of salah, right? And so you have those verses in, let me actually read the translation. Let me pull up a translation over here. So it says here that, and a very similar sort of like, in a very similar sort of like way of introducing it, right? So it says, "Inna al-insana khuliqa halu'a." Truly, the human being is a creature of fright. They're fretful, right? They get anxious. Okay. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. When evil visits him, he becomes impatient, right? وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. And when goodness comes to him, he's begrudging. He doesn't want to give to others, right? So similar to the other verse where where it's saying we did not used to feed the poor, right? When good comes to the human being, he can be very grudging in sharing that goodness with others. Okay, then it says what? إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ, except the Musallin, except the people of Salah. And then it goes on and defines who these people of Salah are, real people of Salah, right? So it says, الَّذِينَ, those who are upon their Salah constant. So they continue, they're da'imun. They are people who are constantly engaged in Salah. So they return to it always, right? They're regular with it. Okay. وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. And those for whom in their wealth they see a right, a portion, right, an allotted portion, an acknowledged right to anybody who asks and those who aren't able to ask, right? For the beggars and the outcasts, or you could say for the impoverished who request, and for those who can't actually ask, right? وَالَّذِينَ يُصَدِّقُونَ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And for those who actually believe in a day of judgment, in a day of requital, right? The day that there will ultimately be justice, right? That there will be a day of compensation, a day of debt, right? Deen is related to debt. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مِنْ عَذَابِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ. And those who from the punishment of their Lord, they are fearful. They worry about that, right? They worry about that. إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّهِمْ غَيْرُ مَعْمُونَ. Because the punishment of their Lord isn't something that you can feel secure from. Okay. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. And those who preserve or guard their private parts, except to their wives, or مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ, or the other wives, basically, right? مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ, we've discussed before, must be married. Okay. فَإِنَّهُمْ غَيْرُ مَلُومِينَ. So then they are not to be blamed. فَمَنِ ابْتَغَى وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. Whoever seeks other than that, then they are the ones who are the transgressors. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. And those who preserve their trusts and their covenants, whatever like pledges they make, they preserve it. Okay, they literally shepherd it, right? Ra'un, they shepherd the things entrusted to them and their promises and covenants. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِشَهَادَاتِهِمْ قَائِمُونَ, and those who stand up in their testimony, right? They bear witness to what is true and what is right. Okay, and they establish right testimony. They testify properly. It's sort of like the way the Christians talk about their testimony, right? وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ, those who protect or preserve their prayers. أُولَٰئِكَ فِي جَنَّاتٍ مُكْرَمُونَ, they are going to be in Jannah. They are going to be where? In Jannah. So when you come back to this verse, the verse you're talking about, where the people of Jannah are asking those who are not in Jannah, what led you to being in hell? They say, we were not of the Musallin, right? Because you have these verses which are saying that being of the Musallin makes you a person who will enter Jannah, right? Is that clear? Is that kind of okay?
No, those are very strong points that you made. So yeah, I understand it. I mean, clear for me now in this verse. I just want to go back to 2 points that you made earlier about the chronicle order. Number one, I have heard, like you said, I have heard that some people would say that the first surah or the first revelation was Surah Al-Fatiha.
Yeah. There are actually a lot of narrations for that, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I haven't found them, so that's why I might need to investigate more. Okay, that's number one. Okay. Now, the second point that you made about, let me see if I understood this correctly. The surah that we're discussing now, the one that I brought to your attention, that one, you would say that it wouldn't really be considered, let me see if I understand this right, a Meccan surah, because the definition of what I'm studying hasn't been revealed yet?
No, I think that they're both Meccan surahs, but I would, for example, just from the internal, the way the Quran is being typed together, right? I would say without doubt that the verse that you're talking about, right, that you're asking about, it comes after those sets of verses in Surah Al-Ma'arij, right? So in this case, this part of Surah Al-Ma'arij comes before the part in Surah Al-Muddathir, right?
Yes.
But again, to remember that these sections, different sections of different surahs, right? One of the issues with the traditional ordering of the surahs is that sometimes a companion or somebody would say that a surah was revealed on this occasion, when in fact all that's happened is the Prophet recited it on that occasion, recited a surah that companion didn't know about before. So the companion is hearing the surah for the first time on a certain occasion, but that same surah had actually been revealed before, right? He just never knew about it, right? Okay. So you have situations like that. Surah Al-Ma'arij is generally considered, I think, Medina, right? It's considered Medina. And I think it's considered Medina because there are some narrations of how after Ghadir Khum, after the event of Ghadir Khum, somebody came to the Prophet and said to him, "Oh Muhammad, what is this that you basically gone all of us following you, and at the end of the day you decide to put your cousin in charge on top of us after you. Is that from you or from God?" And he says, "It's from God." And then and then the person says, "Well, if that's from God, may God send down stones to kill me." And then that happens, and then the Prophet and then God reveals Surah Al-Ma'arij, right? So there's a narration going like that, right? And that's why there are some narrations which say that this is from Medina, even though let's say that something like this did happen, right? It would likely be that the Prophet just recited that surah on that occasion, right? And whoever was transmitting later assumed that that's when the surah was revealed, right? But again, look, the issue with Especially when when you read these surahs sometimes, especially in Arabic, you will see that there are different sections. They have clearly different sections, right? Sometimes even the rhyme scheme changes, right? So Surah Iqra, for example, right? The beginning part that we took, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم, right? Up to there, that's its own sort of like rhyme scheme. And then the rest of the surah is different. It's quite different, right? So it could very well be that the first part was revealed, as the tradition says, in the cave, but the rest of it was revealed at a much later date, right? Because the rest of it is sort of linked to Abu Jahl, right? I say there are a lot of the rest of the surah is basically about speaking basically about the behavior of Abu Jahl, right? And that happened later, right? It happened later after the Prophet started speaking publicly to people. That's when Quraysh really started to persecute him, right? And prevent him from prayer and all the rest of it. So you can have one surah. The point is, you can have one surah where parts of it were revealed at different occasions. Some parts of it could be in Mecca, some parts of it could have been in Medina, right? And you could have years in between. But if you just take some of the internal links between the surahs, you're able to find which parts precede which, right? At least in this sort of scenario. So for me, in this case, it's very clear, right? Because those verses in Surah Al-Ma'arij talk about the Musallin and how they go to Jannah, and then a later surah makes sense that a later surah would come, and you'd have this dialogue between the people of Jannah and people in hell, and people of Jannah asking the people in hell, what led you there? And they're saying, we weren't of the Musallin. And if you were somebody who was listening to these revelations happening, in real time, sort of chronologically, you would remember, right, that when these people are saying lam nakum min musallin, right, you would remember the verses which were revealed before about the musallin, and you would understand what that actually means. All right.
Yes, no, yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had the
it's okay.
muted. Okay, so that's the part where maybe I would have to ponder upon more, because according to what I'm understanding, this section wouldn't be revealed until after the definition of what a Muslim is, according to your reasoning, correct?
Yeah. Yes,
So,
I'd say that.
So do you find any reasoning in that maybe the word was first revealed and then later the definition was given?
I don't think so. I think it wouldn't make as much sense, right? I think, for example, another example of that, of musallin coming up, is waylun lil musallin alladhina hum an salatihim sahun, right? So you can see that there's an argument being built up, right? If you were to try to lay out chronologically, there's sort of like an argument being built up, right? Showing you what musallin are, and in a positive sense and in a negative sense, right? Because you have, I did that video about what I called sort of deen, right? Which it says waylun lil musallin, woe to the musallin, right? And so you can't really have that concept there by itself just hanging. You wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want that surah to be in circulation without the other ones coming before, right? Like you couldn't have that surah coming by itself and then everybody thinking that God is saying is speaking negatively about salah, right, which is an obvious virtue, right? So you'd rather have the other surahs, the other verses which talk about musallin in how in the positive light, how God is defining it, and then you'd have another surah come down which is juxtaposing a negative view of that. Wail musallin, which musallin? الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون, right? In this case, we're talking about those who are negligent of their salah, right? And also, and again, that surah again, I talked about it in that video. It links strongly as well the idea of giving, right? Of looking after the poor and giving from your giving assistance and being kind to orphans and not being harsh to them. Yeah, so I know I wouldn't say that you could look at it the other way around. I think it seems to be an obvious throwback in the surah to that, right? So the verses in Surah Al-Muddathir seem to be an obvious throwback to be meant to be linked with those in Surah Al-Ma'arij. So I don't think you can swap them in terms of chronologically.
Okay. So let's think about this for a moment.
Mm.
What about if we go, if they had already known what is the Muslim, but then Allah clarifies what He considers to be a Muslim later
No,
on?
I think that's true. Yeah, I think that is true. I think what it is, it isn't. Well, I wouldn't say. Let me put it this way: they wouldn't know what they would understand what salah was, right? They would understand what that was, but they wouldn't. I mean, because this phrasing itself, to be of the musallin, it's quite an odd phrasing, right? It's quite an odd phrasing. It's sort of like setting up its own conception of what of such people, right? It's setting forth a picture of what people who are musallin are, right? So while people, before those surahs, they would know what they would think they would know what a person of salah is. They would think they know what salah is, and they'd think, yeah, musalli is just somebody who does salah, right? But sort of, I guess what like you're saying is that these verses would come and they would lay out what is meant in God's sight, right? And so if these verses are laying out what is meant in God's sight, right? That's all the more reason why these verses should precede those other verses, right? Because if they have a misconception, if the average person has a misconception of what it means to be of the Musallin in God's sight, and then they read those verses that you're talking about in Surah Al-Muddathir, they might make that link to that, right? And they think, okay, then to not enter Jannah, to not enter hell, I should be of the Musallin, and to their mind, to be of Musallin just means to be a person of ritual, outward prayer, to just go through the forms, and that's enough to save me from hell, right? And to help me get to Jannah, right? So if those verses were to come first, you could have that false conception. But having the verses of Surah Ma'arij first, they already set what it means to be of the Musallin in God's sight, right? So you won't get that. You won't get anybody taking the wrong idea.
But can we definitely say that they would have considered Muslim only to be a ritual prayer prior to the ayat that you mentioned about the definition of Muslim?
I think I think so from other verses in the Quran, right? It talks about how their salah in the house was just basically clapping and 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 sort of like being loud, right? There wasn't much to their salah, right? Which verse is that? ما كانت صلاتهم ما كانت صلاتهم عند البيت إلا مكاء وتصفية. Let me try and find that verse. ما كان Yeah, so it's in Surah Al-Anfal, Surah 8, verse 35, where it says, وما كان صلاتهم عند البيت إلا مكاء وتصدية. Right? So it says their salah at the house, so at Mecca, was nothing more than just basically clapping and whistling, right? Just being loud and just clapping. So there wasn't much to it, right? We're just sort of like gesturing and then sort of like noise.
Understood.
So I mean, it would have. Well, it's obvious that Salah would have degenerated. I mean, even now here we have um, Islam and the Muslims and the Quran and everything, and then most people's Salah is sort of degenerated into just being an outward form, right? So what would you say about the prayer of the Arabs before Islam, right? It wouldn't have been much other than sort of like show and outwardness, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Mm.
Well, you gave me a lot to think about.
Yeah,
Inshallah.
no problem. But yeah, it's really good to read the Quran chronologically. You learn a lot from it. I mean, especially, I would also try to sort of like, I don't know how well you know the seerah, but keep this sort of like the biography of the Prophet sort of in mind as well at the same time. One of the most underdeveloped issues that we have, because most of the seerah, most of the biography of the Prophet, um, they've reduced it to basically battles, right?
Yeah,
Even the names of the seerah books sometimes are just called the battles of the Prophet, as if the whole thing was just that.
the seal nectar.
But you, sorry?
The seal nectar. What
Yeah,
you
yeah.
think that?
Most of them. I mean, I'm talking about like sort of like the primary sources, right? The primary sources, the narrations on which everything is built. All these later books are built. Um, they basically the narrations, what was recorded and was sent down in the Maghazi literature, was all basically just that the battles, the Maghazi of the Prophet, and this, and there's a big deficit in terms of the dialogue that happened between the Prophet and the Meccans, right, and how it developed, right, and you can start to, and if we had for certain the chronology of the Quran, we could actually see the development of how things went. I mean, for 13 years in Mecca, well, let's say 10 years of actually publicly preaching, um, the dialogue would have shifted year by year, right? Things would have changed a little bit, how they speak, and what the Quran addresses, and you can sort of see it a little bit in how, some surahs are heavy in terms of the stories of the past, right? And other surahs are heavy in terms of signs of nature, right? So it's sort of showing how the discussion was progressing, right? That first of all discussing about maybe the you know the stories of the past and what happened in the past and how past people met their end and what happened, etc. Right, and then that being a cause of dialogue and discussion between the Prophet and the Meccans, right, and then later on maybe it changing a little bit to being more about the signs of nature and and these sort of things, right, and then maybe things like Surah Al-An'am, right, where it's sort of like very critical. Surah Al-An'am is a surah which is very, you can learn a lot about shirk from it, right? What is really happening in terms of shirk? There's a lot going on in that surah, in that. But so the point is that there was this, that there was a when we're talking about huge ideas here, huge cultural change, right? This back and forth discussion between the Prophet and his followers and the Meccans, right? It wasn't just they were just sitting there for 10 years in Mecca reciting random verses from the Meccan period until finally they left. There was actual argument being developed um, in the Quran in how different surahs and different verses were revealed, right? Tackling different issues with them, I think. But the problem is that most of that is lost. We can't really reconstruct it very easily, right? It wasn't recorded. It wasn't nobody bothered to remember those things, which is a big shame.
True, true. I agree with you. Well,
Mm.
brother, inshallah, I'll let you go. I'm not
Okay.
feeling fit. I'm gonna go.
All right.
All right.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
Salam.
Take care. All right. Let me check the chat very quickly. Assalamu alaikum, Nabil. Some say the Prophet's wives cannot commit zina. Allah chooses wives for the Prophets, and they are chaste women. Well, this is one of the issues that we always have, where you know, placing things on God. That, God chose this. God chose. No, God didn't choose um, wives for prophets. He didn't choose the companions for him, right? It's they who it's they who chose him, right? And it comes back to them. So no, I don't think that that they are. I mean, they're capable of kufr. Why should they be incapable of the lesser thing of infidelity? Makes no sense. Why? Why would God say, okay, I'm choosing wives who what, and then prevent them? Take away their free will of being able to commit zina? No, I don't think that's compatible. But yes, I'm aware that some people say that, and it's just basically said in a way to try to defend any allegations against Aisha. Basically, it's sort of like an attack against the Shia. It's sort of a defense against what they say. Assalamu alaikum. Quran often mentions from believers about thankfulness and kindness towards parents. There are many in Eastern world struggle with extremely narcissistic parents. How they can coexist. Yes, I definitely agree with that. I mean, one of the reasons why it's mentioned so often in the Quran, I think, is because it's difficult, right? Because it can be difficult, so you have to, maintain a lot of patience and do as much as you can. But at the same time, yes, you shouldn't be allow yourself to be warped by narcissistic parents. Parents who just block everything you try to do, or try to stop your progress. So it's sort of like a balancing thing, right? You have to just basically do it the best you can from your side, right? And also have some lines drawn where you have some sort of like autonomy. You don't become a complete slave to your parents. I mean, there was this one. There's actually a narration which is a very good narration, which is there's a hadith of where the Prophet said to somebody once that that son, that you and your wealth are for your father. So what will happen is there was a dispute between a father and his son, right? And the Prophet, they came before the Prophet, and the father was disputing with the son, saying, he doesn't help me, he doesn't do this, he doesn't thing, and the son is saying, well, this is all my hard work, my thing. Why should I give it to him, etc., etc. And the Prophet told the son, you and your wealth are for your father, right? Later on, somebody, a different parent, sort of heard that during the time of Abu Bakr and tried to sort of like co-opt everything of his sons, basically. Tried to take all of his wealth, all of his everything, basically, he had. And so when the son came and complained to Abu Bakr, the father said, well, the Prophet said that, didn't he say that you and your wealth are for your father? So everything that he has and him himself are for me. And Abu Bakr said, no, the Prophet only meant for what you need, right? To be able to maintain your needs, right? So the children should basically, if their parents are not being able to make ends meet, or they're having troubles or stuff like that, no, then the parents have a right to their children's support and their children's wealth in that sort of way. So that's that's an interesting thing I just remembered. But it's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do, especially in general ways. I can speak in a general way, but in different cultures and different places, the trouble the parents can give to their children and children to their parents is very different, right? It's different from different places, dependent on culture. So it's just, you just have to basically try to use your common sense, and do what you can to the best of your ability from your end, and we all hope for each other's forgiveness. Hey, Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. Good to see you. All right, okay. I think we'll end the stream there. I've got nobody else coming on backstage, so let's end it there. And inshallah, I'll see you all again in 2 weeks' time, hopefully. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.